Well, I was in the cabin with Dylan and Jake, and I said, "You mind telling me what the fuck is going on here?" And they said, "Okay, okay. Where should we start?" Well, back about 2 or 3 years ago, Dylan came forward and said, "I met a nice girl named May in our class. She was very shy, very quiet, but very sweet when she got to know her. And we talked for a while, and eventually I asked, because she would never, she would be at the car ride or a pickup line, but no car would ever pick her up, and she would just kind of look absent-mindedly at the rest. And I asked, and one day I just asked her, and I asked her, "Hey, how come no one ever comes to pick you up?" And she got real nervous. But I poked and prodded at her a little bit, and I know I shouldn't have done it, but I did. And she said, "Well, I'm in foster care now." And I felt so sorry for her. And I said, "Oh, well, you think the foster parents would let me come over and see you?" And she said, "No, no, they don't really like other people." And I said, "Alright, well, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know." But there wasn't anything I could do for her. So I introduced her to Jake, and we started hanging out with her more. We started just talking, and uh, and Jake actually introduced her to computer games, and we would play those together, and then eventually we brought her over to the house, and she really liked it. And then she came over to the house for me and Jake's 13th birthday. And then it was after that the grandparents just really fell in love with May. She was so sweet, and also we were already kind of like siblings, and the foster family just did not care about her enough. And so our grandparents adopted her. She was fostered at first, but then she was adopted later on. And in 2019, we decided to move to Massachusetts because our grandparents, our grandfather had gotten a job up north at a factory, and grandma got a job as an accountant there. They both came out of retirement so they could take care of us three kids now. And so, yeah, that's how we moved up here. They worked at the factory, and we were alone with May most of the time. And then COVID happened, and we were alone with her all the time. And to make up for that loneliness, we used to... Well, I feel like Jake better tell this part. Yeah, so, during cool rainy days in like April or early May, we used to walk out in the woods together during quarantine, and we used to find all kinds of random things because this area used to be a tribal ground for the Native Americans. Well, it all was technically, but anyway, we were walking, okay, and And one day, May found this strange, like, stick figure. It was like a doll made out of sticks, but it, it looked like it had stick arms and stick legs, but it was kind of a weird pentagram shape. And it was a really weird shape. It was weird, but I don't know why May took it, but she was just entranced by it, and she would spend, like, she took it in her room, and it laid on her desk right beside her bed for months. And during the summer of 2020, you see, me and Dylan have the same room, but she gets her own room. And during the summer, I swear, I would hear her talking to that thing. Like, she would talk to it, although I didn't catch if that weird stick figure had a name. And one day, I think it was about July, we were outside swimming in that river up there, but it was upstream. And I asked her, "Hey, why are you talking to that stick figure we found in the woods 2 or 3 months ago? Why are you talking?" And she got kind of nervous when I asked her, but she just said, "He's my friend." Or no, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting it wrong. She said, "She's my friend," and I said, "She's your friend? Okay, who is this friend that you're talking to?" And she said, "I don't want to talk about Catherine." And I said, "Catherine? Who's Catherine? Who, who the hell is Catherine?" And I was thinking, oh, okay, maybe she just found a doll, and she likes to talk to it. Okay, and I got to thinking, wait a minute. She's 14, almost 15, and does she still play with toys? And I thought, oh, well, maybe she's just bored, you know? Maybe she's just bored. And so, eventually me and Dylan both just let it go, and we just went on with our lives. Until a couple weeks ago, you see, I heard the grandparents upstairs, and they were fighting because, Grandma was stressed about taking care of us 3 kids during COVID, especially having to work from home. And, Grandpa, he used to be an alcoholic, and he was starting to tip the jug in, if you know what I mean. And yeah, he was just very stressed, and he was just very unhappy with the way the country was going. But what are you gonna do? And then, that day, the day our house burned down, I still remember exactly what I was doing. Like, exactly what I was doing. I was talking to Dylan about my record collection. You see, I had just collected a vintage version of Good Golly Miss Molly, okay? And and I hate that those records got melted in the fire. Hate that. But anyway, I was talking to him about it, and Dylan said, "Why do you always listen to like old music? Like, what? You don't want to listen to Billie Eilish or Lana Del Rey, Olivia Rodrigo, Taylor Swift, or Ed Sheeran, Harry Styles? You don't want to listen to any of those guys?" And I said, "Fuck no. I want to listen to music that's actually good." Now, I do like some country music, and I do like some rap music, but all the other music nowadays, it's nah, not for me. So I took my records up to the attic, and I was in the attic, and well, Dylan claimed to see what was going on, so I'm going to let Dylan tell this part of the story. Thank you, Jacob. Well, anyway, I I went into the living room to go check on Grandpa because he had been drinking a couple beers, even though he was in his 60s, and I was just really worried about him, and he was watching the football game. He was watching either the Patriots or the Panthers. I'm sorry. I I can't remember too much. I'm sorry. But I do remember whatever team was losing, and he was just not happy. And eventually he just gave that loud grunt and fell asleep. And I was like, okay, well, he's out like a light. And I saw May in the kitchen, and I looked over, and then she had that strange doll again. And well, we have our stove. It's an old stove, and it has gas burners that shoot real fire. And she stuck her doll in there, and she turned the gas way up, and then threw it on the wooden floor. And she turned that gas way up. And I didn't see her do it at first. I just saw her fiddling with the stove and her doll, and I was just like, okay, maybe she's cooking something. I don't know. And then, so I go back to watching the game, and I just said to Grandpa, even though he was asleep, "You smell something burning?" And I looked over, and then, like, part of the kitchen was on fire, and I didn't know what to do. And then I realized I left my phone upstairs. I gotta call 911. And then I ran upstairs, and then I grabbed my phone, and then I realized, okay, before I call the fire department, I need to check on everyone. Okay, so I know Jake is in the attic. Grandpa's downstairs. Wait, where's Grandma? Where's Grandma? Is she okay? I know that she went to the bathroom for a bath, and so I go in their room, not trying to be a pervert, and then I noticed that the door to her bathroom, it was barricaded. Like, either she really, really didn't want anybody to disturb her, or somebody had barricaded her door. And so I screamed, "Grandma, the house is on fire. I need to call 911. And I screamed louder and louder, and eventually I heard her pounding on the door trying to get out. And so I go in to take the chair that was barricading her away. And then something was thrown at me like a pot or a vase, and I felt it on the back of my head. And then I heard Jake from the attic screaming, "What? Like, what are you talking about? What is going on?" And then I look up and I see May, and I knew she did not do this by accident. She did it on purpose. She did this on purpose. But I looked at her and I said, "May, did you do this?" And she just ran away. And okay, I didn't have time to worry about her. And then Grandma was in that room screaming. And then I hear Jake in the attic, because he was near the attic ladder, and he said, "Dylan, help me get down." Because for some reason the ladder to the attic wasn't working. And so I run over to go help Jake, and I have to help him, but the fire quickly rose throughout the entire house. And then almost a quarter of the house was burning. The whole kitchen, part of the living room, the back hallway, even where May's room was. But May was in her room. Like, she was in her room as it was burning. But I had to help Jake. So I helped him. And so I told Jake, May set our house on fire. We need to save Grandma and Grandpa, and let's go. And he said, "All right, take me to him." And then so me and Jake get the door unbarricaded, and we let Grandma out. And she was in her bathrobe, and then we escort her out of the house, down the stairs. And then I get to calling the fire department. And then Grandma says, "Wait, where's my husband?" And then I whisper while I was on the phone, and I said, "What? He's passed out drunk on the couch. I'm sorry. I in the panic, I didn't remember to save him." And she said, "Well, I gotta go save my husband." And so Grandma and Jake go back in the house, and then and then the entire living room is engulfed in flames. But Grandpa can barely get up, because he had just woken up from some kind of booze stupor. And then so Jake and Grandma are both shaking him, and then they pick him up. And then a wooden beam falls down on Grandpa's back, and then that woke him up, and he howls in pain. And so we had to drag him near the door. And then we see May on the top of the burning staircase. And then her gown caught fire, and she started to burn. And Jake said, no, don't save her. She caused this." But Grandma didn't listen. She was a natural mother. So she ran up the stairs. And then she burned her feet. And then with the last of her burning energy, she pushed Grandma down the stairs. With the house quickly burning, Jake now had to save both of our grandparents. So he grabbed Grandma and did his best to pull her out. And we heard the the house collapsing all around us. And I had the fire department on the phone, and they were about 5 minutes away. And then he had to go back in for Grandpa. So he ran in, and he grabbed his arms, and Grandpa already had smoke inhalation and and many burn marks, but he dragged him, and eventually he pulled him out. And then the fire department got there, and an ambulance took Grandma and Grandpa away. But unfortunately, they didn't make it. And so they took us to the sheriff's office, and then we knew we were going into foster care just like May was, and no one was going to adopt us. We were 15, so it was going to be the next 3 years from foster family to foster family until we were 18. God, no, we were not about to do that. So we ran away. I mean, we know this is a resort town, and we know that we could probably live here by ourselves because they got empty cabins, empty trailers. They have a store full of food. So we can live off this. And the best part is we don't have to pay any bills or taxes. But there is one downside, and Jake cut in and said, yeah, the downside that May is a fucking ghost now. Yeah, she rises out of the river, and she has these, like, sharp sticks or harpoon-like things, and then she'll hurl them, she'll throw them, and then she'll drag you towards her. And she also has the ability to shoot water. And she also has the ability to set herself on fire and then burn stuff. So, yeah. And then Dylan cut back in and said, all right, so it turns out that I did my research, and I found out that the natives believe that there was a certain evilness to this area. They believed it was cursed. And they believed that the curse was in the trees. And should anyone take part of the trees with them, then they would start to become cursed. Now, the curse is very slow acting, but it gets you eventually. And then, once you die, your soul becomes trapped here. And you haunt the trees. And then, after I heard that, I was just like, whoa. What kind of fantasy Blair Witch shit is this? Shit. Come on. I mean, is it any crazier than the stuff I've seen? At this point, I'm like the adult Scooby-Doo and horror movie James Bond. I've seen it all. So, I worked out a plan. But first, I told them, hey guys, you don't have to worry. You know why? Because when we get out of here, me and your Aunt Mia are gonna adopt you. and you're going to live with us. Okay? Don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. And you could tell they were really relieved. And Jake said, yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd love that. But we got to get out of here. And I said, oh, right. Okay. Oh, I got it. Since this seems to be spiritual, how about we pray about it? And they looked at me like, are you serious? What? We've tried that. We were both raised Christian. Oh. Right. Okay. Wait, hold on. You said that the curse is in the trees, right? Well, what if we get May to burn down the forest? And then the curse of this land should be lifted. And Dylan said, okay, not a bad idea. But wait, why didn't the Native Americans do that? I sneezed and I said, shit, I don't know. Yeah, come to think of it, I don't know. And I said, wait, it's probably because they knew that if they set the woods on fire, it would just spread and spread and spread and spread. And they didn't have the fire department back then. So they probably just thought it best to just move away from here. And I said, we could move away from here. And then Jake said, what? Were you not listening? We can't, because that bitch, sorry Dylan, but that bitch ghost is keeping us here. And I said, all right, okay. I got it. What if... Wait, hold on. This cabin has electricity. Wait, what's it running off of? Because you guys aren't paying the power bill. And Dylan said, oh yeah, it's all running off of generators. And I said, gas-powered generators? And he said, yeah. Oh. And yeah, he knew what I meant. And I said, all right, okay. Let's get the gallons of gas, and we are going to pour it all over the woods and the trees. And then, well, we're just gonna hope that it works, okay? All right, okay. And then Dylan said, well, we really should be stocking up on gas, because once quarantine is over, I think gas is gonna go way up. And I said, you're right. But right now we're trying to get some crazy, witchy ghost out of here. So I think the crazy witch ghost is more important than inflation and economics at this moment. And he said, yeah, you're right. So we took a couple gallons of gas, and then Dylan said, wait, hold on. She's going to see us doing this. And also, she's not stupid. So what do we do? She's going to stop us. So what do we do? And I said, wait, a distraction. That's what we need. A distraction. Dylan, you were closest with her. You need to do something to distract her. Oh, yeah. Using me as Using me as bait. Yeah, using the gay guy as bait. And I said, wait, you're gay? No, it doesn't matter right now. It doesn't matter. What matters is getting out of here alive. And he's like, what even do I do? How do I distract her? And I said, you can try to reach out to her. And then he said, okay, how? Talk to her about how you used to be. Okay. Okay, maybe I could do that, but what if she hurls her harpoons at me and sets me on fire? And I said, we'll be quick. Better be, because if not, yeah, I'm gonna die. And I said, hey, if she starts doing that, make her chase you, but not towards us, okay? And I said, okay, where are the gas cans? And Dylan said, all right, well, I'm off to go do my distraction. And so we got the gas cans. And then we ran into the woods near where the collection of cabins were, and we just started pouring, and we started walking while we were pouring. And then I said, wait a minute. I think we need to burn this entire area. So we need to get across that bridge and then light some more trees over there. And Jake said, good thinking, man, good thinking. And so Jake took the lighter he'd been making to make fires in the cabin, and then he lit a leaf and threw it, and then whoosh, the fire started in the forest, across the river, away from that town, Little Hope. And then the spectral black mass in the shape of a girl howled and then started to have some orange glows in her, orange and red glows. And then I heard Dylan across the street say, oh, come on, I was just getting through to her. And I said, too late, we gotta burn the other side of this forest. So we ran across that covered bridge, and then May threw fire on top of the bridge and starts setting fire to the whole bridge, and then we could feel it heat up inside. And so we ran to the other to get to the other side of the bridge, and then she appeared right in front of us and then hurled a chain, but on the end of this chain was a stick and a little metal rod, and she used it to wrap it around someone and get it stuck in their skin. And I stepped right in front of the twins to protect them, and then that rod and the metal chain went right in me, and I felt those cold, wet chains surround me. And then she started to pull me, but I planted my feet firmly in the ground, and I said, go, Jacob, continue burning, okay? And then she threw a massive gush of water right at the twins. And that caused Dylan to slip and fall, but Jake kept running. And he started pouring more gasoline onto the woods. And he pulled out his lighter, and then another gush of water put out the light from his lighter. And then he tried to light it again, but it was hard. And then Dylan came back with his smooth voice and said, Hey, remember at school when we first met and we started talking? And I remember you didn't have not a single person was talking to you, but I decided to break the ice, even though I didn't have to. And it was at lunch, and we sat down, and we just talked about books until lunch was over. I knew then that I loved you, May. You were my sister. Come on, May. You have to get away from this evil witch Catherine, or whatever the fuck she wants to call herself. And then I saw the face of a teenage girl come through, but it was a young teenage girl, and she looked rather sad. And so I used the strength that I still thank Dr. Eugenic for every day, and I pulled the chain forward. And then the shadow, scary witch, whatever the fuck we're calling her, came forward to me too. And then I used my elbow to break that chain. And then I ran, and then I tried to give her a mean left hook, but she disappeared right as the bridge was collapsing and I got out. And then I decided to use one of the sticks that had fallen off the bridge, and then in the spot where Jacob poured the gasoline, I lit it on fire, and I heard another loud cry, and then the ghost ascended up to the sky, but there were more orange and red spots all over her. And then she tried to use her power of water to put out the fire, but it was no use. The fire was just beginning. And that, because I don't know if you know this, but forest fires are pretty hard to put out, and she could only send a big gush of water. She couldn't act like a fire hose. And then we knew that May was dead, and I, being a Christian man, said, May, it's not too late to go to heaven. Just ask for forgiveness from God and really mean it. And then Dylan and Jake will see you in heaven someday, and the family can be together again. And she smiled. And then the young teenage girl's face came through, the ghost again, smiled, and then there was a bluish, whitish orb that floated out of the shadow mass, whatever you want to call it, and floated up towards the sky. I guess that was her going to heaven. But we still had to deal with the spirit named Catherine, or whatever she wanted to be called. And she said, "Damn you boys! Damn you all to hell!" And then she started, those spots started spreading over her, and then I realized they were sparks, and she was dying. And then she screamed a god awful, guttural, demonic scream like, "Ah!" And then she just exploded and vaporized. And in the distance, I could see that the sky was turning from black to a bluish gray color. The sun was coming up soon. So, me, Dylan, and Jake walked all the way back out of that town and back into the sheriff's station. And I just couldn't believe the look on the mailman and the sheriff's face. And then I knew I had a long journey ahead of adopting them. But I knew we could do it.